on this map, that is really the best thing to call that existing proposed site is the Y site, because it is the location in which the Y of the railroad tracks allow, movement in all directions. And the number one positive we could come up for that site is that nobody else wants it. Or you could also say that it's a creative use for a Superfund site. It's well known that that's a heavily contaminated site with lead, and I heard somebody say this morning there's something like 35 wells pumping on there to remove probably hydrocarbons. And it just does not have a lot of options, and once it gets paved over, it's going to be paved over forever. And so that being, and the other positive thing is it's between a lot of things. There's nothing there and there's nothing right next to it, but it's certainly between a lot of other things. But that's a rather faint positive. The really only overwhelming positive is there's a lot of area there to put asphalt on for parking. And you're stuck with it. So the other site, I think the best thing to call it is Guerneville. Certainly a well-known cross-town street, so it already has a perception of a place that people go in the safety of eyes. It's accessible and known, and has existing transit here, and the potential for connecting, extending coffee, and having another access straight into Cottingtown, gives it a real positive. The existing housing density is greater there, and there's just the potential for the development to have a lot more of both commercial and housing within the radius of this that are much greater. This whole issue of grade crossings, certainly there's no approved way to get to the west side any place except at these two streets at this point. And not having access to this from the west side, other than making it a circuitous route, is a definite negative. And the other thing is, if you talk about overpass options, there are a lot more options for places that there could be alternative crossings to 101, north and south of Steel Lane, if you're talking about this. Let's give him a hand. Good work.
The site nobody else wants. You guys are great sound bites. I love it. Okay, the last one. Here we go.
All right, we were real clear about our objectives, pros and cons for each site. The Jennings Station pros are that there's a larger parking area. It's closer to downtown. There's also already an environmental impact report, as we've discussed. There is a bus access potential. The overcrossing to SRJC, the proximity to SRJC is much more available. More direct access to SRJC for bikes and pedestrians. Existing residential is nearby, and there's also nearby vacant land as well, so for further development. The cons of the Jennings Station site was that it's an industrial area, meaning that it's not frequent, it's somewhat vacant, so maybe the crime, potential for crime may be higher. Far from the main streets, poor access from the west side of town. There are toxics underground. Again, somewhat isolated location, meaning that was my understanding of the industrial area.
Let's say negative.
Yeah. Guerneville Road Station pros, it's more visible, safer. There's more easy access from the north-south east-west corridors. Access by multiple modes of transportation. There are roads, bus, retail and commercial jobs nearby. The Cottingtown site is closer. Encourages reuse of Cottingtown property for housing. I'm not real clear on that one. Maybe somebody could add to that for clarity.
Well, we were thinking that as part of the redevelopment of the mall, since there's so much kind of vacant land around the mall itself, that some of that would go to developing housing.
Okay, thank you. Private development partnership. We were not sure if that would be a positive or a negative. Actually, there are pros and cons to that point. The cons would be eminent domain. Maybe people will be moved from the vicinity of the Guerneville station in order to accommodate the development for the train station. Less space for parking. It's further from the JC. It's also farther from the bike routes. And the bike and pedestrian is not as safe at the Guerneville site as it would be at the Jennings site. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Okay. Okay, so Peter's going to take the list of how we've kind of coalesced all these discussions. Go ahead, put it in the back. There you go. As you can see, there were a lot of commonality, a lot of overlap. So I think we've got a good list of about a dozen things there that I think really boil it down to the essence.
I just wanted to make one point of, there's a lot of, I don't know, urban legend isn't the right term, or it's myths about things that are accepted as truth. And one of the things that our table discovered is one of the myths about this planning process is that the Jennings site is actually closer to the JC. If you actually look at the heart of the junior college, the middle of it, the distance is almost exactly the same between the Guerneville site and the Jennings site. The Jennings site is closer to the lower corner, which is essentially the boneyard of the JC, but it's not actually closer to the heart of the junior college. So, I don't know, there's something, these are things that come to surface that maybe aren't particular to one station or the other, but maybe it's something that ought to be addressed or raised as an issue that everybody should be aware of.
Are you trying to confuse us with facts?
Yes.
I'm not so sure that's a good idea. But no, you're right. Maybe we should add another one here about clarity of the communication of what's really going on with the various issues around here. Yes, ma'am.
One thing that I've just thought about, it hasn't been raised yet, is parcel ownership and regulation. A huge issue.
Can you elaborate a little bit? I'm not sure I'm following exactly where you're going.
Well, if you're thinking of where could you best develop a truth-oriented development, working with existing property owners, who owns them, how willing and receptive are they to redeveloping, it's really important to look at who owns the parcels, what size are they, how are they configured on the ground.
At this stage, at this level of what we're talking about, I would encourage you to ignore that. What's the desired outcome? Where do you want to go? And then once you've got a vision, it's amazing how an envisioned better future will often start to bring people